This video was inspired by comic book cast to's Stop Pretending Phases 1 through 3 of the MCU Were Perfect video. What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Sodium285, and today I'm going to do a little bit of a different type of video. Now, initially I wasn't planning on making a video like this, but after years and years and years of seeing people say stuff like Disney is ruining Marvel, or how apparently the downfall of the MCU was Phase 3, I feel enough is enough. This video needs to be made, and I'm not just talking about Marvel movies in general or the MCU, I'm talking about Marvel movies and TV shows, including the animated ones, today. Now, this isn't me saying that I've loved everything Marvel since Disney bought the company back in 2009. I haven't. A lot of the animated shows just weren't my thing, except for Marvel Spider-Man. I really like that, and I don't think Ultimate Spider-Man is as bad as people make it out to be. I actually think it's fine. It has its issues, but I think it's fine. And while I haven't loved all of the other movies and TV shows, especially in phases 4 and 5, but again, the MCU has never been perfect, and that's my argument for today. Marvel in movies and TV shows has never been perfect. Some people have been acting as if we hadn't gotten any lackluster entries in the MCU before Endgame, or that there weren't any lackluster movies or shows before the birth of the MCU with Iron Man, or before Disney bought Marvel back in 2009. So, for this video, I'm just going to look at some of the reviews across different review websites of a lot of the Infinity Saga Phase 1 and 2 movies, as well as of some of the movies and shows outside of the MCU, including the animated ones. So as I bring up these scores of many of the Phase 1 and Phase 2 movies of the MCU, I want you to pay close attention to these numbers and look how much of the critic scores of Phase 1 and 2 were actually in the 60s and the 70s. I mean, there is a reason why I consider, for one, Captain America the First Avenger and Ant-Man as some of the most underrated movies in the entire MCU, because many people didn't pay attention to the first Captain America or Ant-Man. People were dismissive of them, and for one, would often be lumped with For the Dark World and The Incredible Hulk as one of the worst films in the MCU, which I've always disagreed with. But that's the fact of the matter. And honestly, look at For the Dark World and The Incredible Hulk. In the 60s or 50s, across Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes, many people thought those were too generous of critic scores. Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, Avengers Age of Ultron, I mean, many people considered them massive disappointments. They thought Iron Man 2 had a messy plot. People were pretty much merciless towards Iron Man 3 just for the Mandarin twist, or because you had more of Tony Stark outside of the suit rather in the suit. Age of Ultron, people thought it was too comedic because Ultron wasn't as scary, even though I think he was scary. There's a reason why I think Age of Ultron is underappreciated. Same thing with Iron Man 3. I think that movie is very underrated because a lot of people were very much merciless towards that film. And that's just inside of the MCU. Now we move on to outside of the MCU. And now as I bring up a lot of the critic scores for a lot of these Marvel movies that were made by other studios like Sony and Fox and Universal, again, pay attention to these numbers and observe how many of these movies were actually either in the 60s, the 50s, or even below 50, because actually quite a few of them were below 50. I mean, yeah, there were the first two Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies and the first two X-Men movies by Bryan Singer, but even then, they weren't considered perfect like some people consider them now, and those were very much the outliners. I mean, look at the rest. Spider-Man 3. People outright hated that movie. It was considered to have destroyed a franchise in the same way Batman and Robin did. It didn't do good at all. Even though I kind of like Spider-Man 3, I do understand it has its issues, and I'm very much in the minority. Most people hated this movie when it came out. X-Men Origins Wolverine? I mean, that was considered like the worst film in the X-Men universe, at least before Dark Phoenix came along. And even then, many people were insisting that Origins was still worse than Dark Phoenix. Fantastic? That's possibly the most universally despised superhero movie of all time. A movie that basically got the Fantastic Four book at Marvel Comics cancelled for 3 years. But then you get those that join the brands eventually. You have your Into the Spider-Verse, Guardians of the Galaxy, Deadpool, X-Men First Class, Logan, movies that surprised many people. Well, as you know, if you're familiar with my channel, that I don't like Into the Spider-Verse, but I'm in the minority. Most people love it. Guardians of the Galaxy, I think it's the most overrated film in the MCU, but again, I'm in the minority. A lot of people love it. But I do think Deadpool, and especially First Class and Logan, deserve every ounce of praise they get. I love First Class and Logan so much. But then you get to more, I guess, look at everything with rose-tinted glasses times, and suddenly, Ghost Rider, the first one with Nicolas Cage, everyone looks at it as like, wow, the good times when the superhero movie genre was great. Ghost Rider was such a great movie. And Daredevil, the one with Ben Affleck, many people are like, remember when we were getting fantastic movies like this? Wow, the superhero movie genre was great when we didn't care about race bending, we just cared about great writing. Oh my goodness, look at Punisher Warzone. What an amazing film. It's dark and edgy. They should make movies like that again. People hated Punisher Warzone. Nobody saw it in theaters. It's only made $10.1 million at the box office. That's right, it made way less money than any MCU movie, even the lower grossing ones to this day. It made less money than Howard the Duck. It made less money than Elektra. It made less money than Fantastic, Morbius, and even Madam Web. It's the lowest grossing Marvel movie possibly out there. Nobody cared about the movie, and even the reviews weren't hot. Many thought that Frank Castle was this two-dimensional character that barely does anything in the movie. Like, nobody cared about it. New Mutants was thrown out to die by everyone. Like, nobody cared about the New Mutants at all, which is a shame because I think New Mutants is a fine film, but the fact of the matter is, nobody cared about it. People just were like, oh, it came and went, whatever. And even Into the Spider-Verse and Guardians 1, they were thrown out to die by everyone up until they saw it. Nobody was excited to see those films. People had low expectations, only for them to end up enjoying it, but whatever. And now people over-exaggerate how great movies like Blade were, when if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, there weren't as many critics who actually liked the Blade films, not just the third one, all three of them. They have Rotten Tomato scores in the 50s. That ought to tell you something. And the same goes for the X-Men movies and the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. People act as if they're cinematic masterpieces, especially the Raimi films, as if they're some of the greatest superhero movies of all time, that they're perfect. People hated Kirsten Dunst's Mary Jane. People didn't like the CGI in the first Raimi film. People were not fans of the Green Goblin suits in either Spider-Man 1 or 3. And people hated Topher Grace, probably undeservingly, because I don't think it's his fault Venom wasn't great in Spider-Man 3. And people called Kirsten Dunst's Mary Jane a damsel in distress, a pointless one. Same thing with Bryan Singer's X-Men. People really didn't like the black leather suits and how everything felt dull or uncomic booky. People didn't like that the team dynamic wasn't there. People didn't like Anna Paquin's Rogue, again, maybe undeservingly. I think she did the best with what she could, but people didn't like that she wasn't sass-talking like in the animated series. Same thing with X-Men 3. People hated Brett Ratner, and many made articles about whether X-Men The Last Stand was the death of comic book movies. And now Revisionist History will tell you people love Dark Phoenix, how that movie was somehow good, and that The Marvels is really bad. And to all those people that make fun of movies like Thor Love and Thunder, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, and The Marvels for actually having fun, well, at least they're not embarrassed of the source material or have costumes that look like this, or stupid lines like this.
You actually go outside in these things? What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
And swinging back to the MCU, People nowadays look at Doctor Strange as like, ah, what an amazing character, what an amazing film. Scott Derrickson's a genius, and then look what they had to do. They had to bend over backwards to be part of the MCU by adding more references to the MCU. Everything has to be connected. That is what many people are pretending, as if Doctor Strange was perfect, as if the first half of Phase 3 was better than the second half. Only to find out that the original argument regarding Doctor Strange was that people hated Scott Derrickson, thought all he did was make a cheap Iron Man knockoff that has nothing to do with the MCU. Why don't the other Avengers show up? So they're basically going back on some of their complaints that they had said earlier and basically contradicting themselves. But the biggest victim of MCU revisionist history, in my opinion, is by far Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. When that film first came out, a lot of people didn't think it was anything special. People thought it had a lackluster story, had mean-spirited humor, and was a major step down from the first Guardians movie. But now, suddenly, after the release of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, as well as James Gunn being in charge of DC, it's apparently a masterpiece. People who had previously ranked it at best in the middle of their MCU ranking previously, and at worst towards the bottom of their MCU ranking, now suddenly have it in their top 10 or even top 5, higher than the likes of Iron Man or Black Panther. You know, movies you typically think of when you think the best in the MCU, as if it was always graced, as if James Gunn just creates 10 out of 10 movies.
Now, this was a good ride. It was real fun for the kids. Safe, too, if they didn't jump around too much. They don't make them like this anymore.
And I'll also say this before I move on to the TV shows. To all those people that keep saying, well, what do we have now? Thor Love and Thunder and Screaming Goats? To those people I have to say, well, what did we have in the 2000s? Spider-Man 2 and Screaming Women?
Was that over the top? I can never tell.
And it's not just the Marvel movies that were made by other studios and the Infinity Saga MCU movies that are going through this revisionist history where everyone is pretending that everything back then was better than what we have today. The shows are guilty of this too, in particular the Netflix shows. Now, I haven't watched too much of the Netflix shows, but from what I heard, Inhumans and Iron Fist were absolutely hated. But now, people are acting as if shows like She-Hulk and Secret Invasion are worse than that, and as if Disney Plus has ruined live-action Marvel shows. And some, like Luke Cage and Runaways, weren't particularly cared about, and I don't recall people raving about Cloak and Dagger, but I'll see for myself. Really, it was just Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Daredevil that carried them, from the public perception's point of view at least. Same thing with the animated stuff. A lot of people have been acting as if Disney ruined Marvel animation, as if there weren't any terrible Marvel animated shows or even films before Disney came along. And even then, I don't think all the stuff Disney has produced animated for Marvel has been terrible. Back when Ultimate Spider-Man had first come out in 2012, a lot of people had said this on YouTube.
And then the Marvel show that has had possibly the worst response from the fans and critics ever.
So is this the part where we forget that Spider-Man Unlimited was hated just as much when it first came out? Same thing with the Invincible Iron Man animated movie, Iron Man Armored Adventures, the first season of Fantastic Four the animated series, the first season of Iron Man the animated series. Heck, is this the part we forget that Avengers United They Stand ever existed?
Next time, get the facts before you decide to punish someone.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are actually quite a few Marvel animated shows and even movies that came before Disney bought Marvel that were not initially very well received and got at best mixed reviews and at worst terrible reviews. And nowadays they're just really cult shows that have found an audience. So yeah, I would honestly say that Spider-Man Unlimited, Iron Man Armored Adventures, Avengers United They Stand have become just as much of cult shows as shows like Ultimate Spider-Man, Avengers Assemble, and Marvel Spider-Man are now. Granted, Ultimate Spider-Man has kind of also become a victim of revisionist history, as when Marvel Spider-Man had first come out, a lot of people went back and said, you know what, Ultimate Spider-Man was a very good show. The new Spider-Man show really sucks. And then there are people who act as if you're a fake Spider-Man fan if you actually like both of them and think both of them are pure garbage. And honestly, I think those people are wrong. If anything, them being toxic and telling people what they should like and what they shouldn't is them being fake Spider-Man fans, as it goes against everything Spider-Man stands for. And I feel that's the biggest problem with Marvel fans today. They basically try to condition people that what came before was better than what we have now by hating on the old stuff less than what they're hating on now, so that it looks like as if what came before was nothing in terms of bad compared to what we have now. Not only that, but I feel a lot of people are also letting their nostalgia get in the way. And look, there is nothing wrong in enjoying and continuing to enjoy what you grew up with. We all have our own controversial opinion. I know I have quite a few controversial opinions, so there's nothing wrong with that. But to act as if what we had in our childhood or what we had before is objectively better than what we have now, and going, boy, how far Marvel has fallen, kind of shows a bit of ignorance, especially when you consider some of the stuff that you might have liked when you were a kid and still like, which there's no problem in doing that. I'm not trying to brainwash anyone, but what I'm trying to say is what we may have enjoyed and still enjoy from the past not only may have not have been very well received, but may have been just as hated back when it came out as anything that is coming out today. And make no mistake, the Multiverse Saga of the MCU hasn't been perfect, but it's not actually that different from the other eras of Marvel. You have some good ones, you have some great ones, but you also have some lesser ones. Which is actually just like the Infinity Saga. You have some good ones, you have some great ones, but you also have some lesser ones. And all the Marvel movies that were made by other studios vary in quality like this too. Again, you have some good ones, you have some great ones, but you also have some that I think are pure garbage. And the quality of the Marvel cartoons from every decade vary like this too. You have some good ones, you have some great ones, but you also have some forgettable, bad, or garbage ones. Every decade for Marvel has had its flaws, but they've always had their high points. No era for Marvel has been perfect. Heck, no era for any franchise has been perfect. But they've always had their high points and low points. But unfortunately, there are those people that beg to differ, which is what sparked me to make this video. And unfortunately, this isn't something that is exclusive to the Marvel fandom. Other fandoms have done this too. Take the Power Rangers fandom, for example. Many people would tell you that the first decade of Power Rangers, the old Saban era, was some kind of golden age, when really the original argument was a lot of people checked out of Power Rangers after Zeo because they didn't enjoy it. Many people thought Turbo almost killed the Power Rangers franchise. Lightspeed Rescue and Wild Force were panned for having terrible acting, and if there were memorable parts, it was really due to two things: the Titanium Ranger, in the case of Lightspeed Rescue, and Forever Red, in the case of Wild Force. And the Sonic fandom is like this too. A lot of people have acted as if Sonic had this perfect track record before Shadow the Hedgehog came out, hence why they call the period of 2005 to the 2010 the dark age of Sonic. But really, games like Sonic are cult classics because back then, it was pretty much met with mixed reviews at best, and at worst, it was panned. A lot of people did not like a lot of those mid to late 90s Sonic games. And don't get me started on the DCAU fandom, where they basically act as if everything DC related, or heck, anything superhero related, should be more like the DCAU. So when I criticize something for being too much like the DCAU, they're like, why wouldn't it want to be like that? The DCAU was perfect. Blissfully ignoring that people don't really talk about Static Shock, and the Zeta Project. I guess what I'm trying to say is revisionist history has become a plague on the Marvel fandom, and I feel that is what's ruining the Marvel fandom today. As well as some people's nostalgia for what they grew up with, where they act as if suddenly stuff like Spider-Man 3, or Iron Man Armored Adventures, or Spider-Man Unlimited, or Ghost Rider, and whatnot are objectively better, and they're like, how Disney has ruined Marvel. I don't blame Disney at all. Not everything Disney has produced Marvel related has been perfect, but that has been the same for Marvel forever. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the situation. Do you agree with me that Disney isn't necessarily ruining Marvel, and that is actually a lot of people's nostalgia or revisionist history glasses that are getting in the way of people enjoying Marvel related stuff now? Whatever it is, let me know. Guys, again, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll be back very soon. Until then, Sodium285 out.
If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have.